Picture a city alive with the energy of thousands of people trading in bustling markets, children playing in crowded squares, leaders governing from grand palaces. But if you were to look for the roads that brought in the food, water, and goods that sustained this vibrant capital, you would find nothing, not a single supply route leading in or out. How is that possible? How did some of the greatest civilizations in history not only survive but flourish, cut off from the world above? The answer lies deep below the surface, in one of humanity's best-kept secrets, a hidden world of tunnels, channels, and chambers known as the underground network. These labyrinthine systems moved water, stored food, and transported goods entirely out of sight, allowing ancient metropolises to thrive in places where geography, climate, or even enemies made above-ground roads impractical or impossible. This is not just a story about clever engineering, it's a testament to human resilience and imagination. Long before modern technology, cultures from Persia to Peru devised ways to tap into the Earth's resources with astonishing precision. They carved subterranean aqueducts through solid rock, designed natural refrigeration systems that kept harvests fresh for years, and created hidden pathways that allowed entire cities to function under the radar. These networks were so effective, so seamlessly integrated into daily life, that many of them remained hidden for centuries. Some are still being discovered today. They supported populations numbering in the hundreds of thousands, turned deserts into breadbaskets, and helped capitals withstand sieges, droughts, and the tests of time. Join me as we descend into these depths and uncover how these systems worked, why they were built, and what they can teach us today about sustainability, ingenuity, and survival. We'll walk in the footsteps of the engineers who designed them, explore the archaeological finds that continue to astonish experts, and reveal how these hidden infrastructures shaped the course of history. From the qanats of ancient Persia to the Cryptoporticus of Rome, from secret water systems beneath Jerusalem to the subterranean granaries of Mali, this journey will change the way you see and beneath the world. So settle in and let's unlock one of history's most fascinating mysteries: how entire civilizations thrived without a single road in sight. To understand how these hidden networks came to be, we need to travel back thousands of years to a time when survival itself was the ultimate motivator for innovation. The very first subterranean supply systems weren't born from a desire for convenience, but from pure, unadulterated necessity. Ancient civilizations, from the Romans and Persians to the indigenous cultures of the Americas, were constantly pushed by their environment and circumstances to look for solutions beyond the surface. Imagine a city under siege, its walls holding back enemies but also trapping its people inside. How would they get water? How would they move supplies without being seen? Or picture a community living in an arid, unforgiving desert where surface water evaporates instantly under the scorching sun. Where do you find a reliable water source? The answer, time and again, was to go down, to burrow, to carve into the earth itself. Warfare was perhaps the most urgent driver. The constant threat of invasion and siege meant that a city's survival depended on its ability to sustain itself when completely cut off from the outside world. Historians point to places like ancient Jerusalem, where a sophisticated network of underground tunnels and aqueducts, like the famous Silome tunnel, was engineered to secure access to the Gihon Spring, a vital water source that lay outside the city walls. This wasn't just a clever engineering project, it was a matter of life and death. By channeling water through a hidden, 500-meter-long tunnel carved directly through bedrock, the city could withstand a prolonged siege without its enemies ever knowing where the water was coming from. This kind of strategic thinking transformed these subterranean passages from simple utilities into revolutionary assets that could determine the outcome of wars and the fate of entire nations. But it wasn't just conflict that spurred this innovation. Climate played an equally powerful role. In the vast, dry plateaus of ancient Persia, the challenge wasn't hiding water from enemies but finding it at all. The climate was so arid that surface rivers were seasonal and unreliable. This environmental pressure gave birth to one of the most brilliant hydrological inventions in history, the Kanat. These were underground canals that tapped into water trapped deep within alluvial fan aquifers at the base of mountains. Workers would dig a series of vertical shafts down to the water table and then connect them with a gently sloping underground tunnel, allowing gravity to pull the water for miles across the desert to where it was needed for irrigation and drinking. This system prevented the massive evaporation that would have occurred in open-air canals, making agriculture possible in some of the most inhospitable landscapes on Earth. It was a direct, ingenious response to a climatic reality, and it allowed Persian cities to grow into thriving, populous capitals. Urban density presented another compelling reason to build down instead of out. As ancient cities like Rome expanded, they became incredibly crowded. The streets were chaotic, space was at a premium, and the risk of fire or disease from above-ground storage was high. The solution was to create a second city beneath the streets. The Romans became masters of this, constructing vast underground complexes known as Cryptoporticus. These were long, barrel-vaulted passageways, often built beneath forums and villas, that served as storage areas, cool places to escape the summer heat, and even discreet routes for moving goods and people away from the congested thoroughfares above. They effectively doubled the usable space of the city without expanding its footprint, a concept that feels remarkably modern even today. What historians emphasize is that these systems were far more than just functional. They were revolutionary. They fundamentally changed what was possible for a society. A city was no longer bound by its immediate geography. It could thrive in a desert, withstand a siege for years, and support a population density that would otherwise be unsustainable. This underground infrastructure became the silent, unseen backbone of growth and prosperity, the critical foundation that allowed ancient capitals to evolve from simple settlements into powerful, enduring centers of civilization. But to truly grasp the scale of their achievement, we need to understand the immense environmental hurdles they were up against. Geography wasn't just a backdrop for these ancient engineers, it was the primary antagonist they had to outsmart. In countless regions, the very idea of building and maintaining a reliable network of above-ground supply roads was a fantasy. The landscape itself stood in the way. Towering mountain ranges presented impassable barriers for heavy carts. Vast deserts offered no water for travelers or their pack animals, and dense, tangled jungles hid countless dangers while making straight paths impossible. It was these profound challenges that forced human ingenuity to find another way, to look beneath the surface for a solution. Consider the stark, sun-baked plateaus of ancient Persia. Here, the primary antagonist was an arid, unforgiving climate where rainfall was scarce and surface water evaporated almost instantly under the relentless sun. An above-ground canal system would have been not just inefficient, but completely useless, losing its precious contents to the dry air long before it reached its destination. This environmental pressure is what gave birth to the Kanat, a breathtakingly simple yet effective solution, but building it was a direct conversation with the geography. The soil composition was critical. Workers needed loose, alluvial soil that was firm enough to hold the tunnel's shape but soft enough to be excavated with hand tools. They had to pinpoint the water source, often finding aquifers at the base of mountains where snowmelt seeped into the ground. Then came the mastery of slope. The tunnel had to have a gradient just steep enough for the water to flow by gravity over many miles, but gentle enough to prevent erosion that would collapse the entire structure. This was precision engineering, achieved through observation and experience, not calculation. Seasonal variations added another layer of complexity. A system that worked during the wet season might run dry during a drought, so builders had to tap into deeper, more reliable aquifers to ensure a year-round supply. The qanats didn't fight the environment. They worked in harmony with it, using the natural slope of the land and the constant, cool temperature underground to protect the water from the harsh elements above. This same principle of using geography as a guide can be seen in the rocky highlands of ancient Jerusalem. Here, the challenge wasn't just aridity, but also security. The city's main water source, the Gihon Spring, was located outside the protective city walls, making it dangerously vulnerable during a siege. The solution was the famous Silome Tunnel, a 500-meter-long subterranean channel chiseled directly through solid limestone bedrock. The rock itself, while incredibly hard to dig through, provided a stable, permanent structure that wouldn't collapse and could be defended. This hidden passage secured the city's water supply by keeping it entirely within the protected rock, invisible to any attacking army. It was a direct and brilliant adaptation to a geographical and military threat. Even in lush, forested regions like those inhabited by the ancient Maya, surface roads known as sakbiob were often built up on raised causeways, but they were still vulnerable to flooding and erosion from heavy seasonal rains. In many cases, the Maya also developed underground choltons, bottle-shaped cisterns carved into the soft limestone, to capture and store rainwater. The porous limestone was ideal for this, and these underground reservoirs provided a safe, clean water source that was protected from contamination and the tropical sun, showcasing how soil and rock type directly influenced the design of their survival systems. From the deserts of Persia to the mountains of Peru, human beings became students of their environment. They learned to read the land, to understand its secrets and its weaknesses, and to use those very elements to create something enduring. They didn't see the underground as a barrier, but as a partner, a hidden space where geography could be harnessed, not conquered, paving the way for settlements to grow into sustainable, resilient capitals. What's truly staggering is that these ancient builders achieved all of this without a single piece of modern machinery. No GPS to map their routes, no dynamite to blast through rock, and no reinforced steel to shore up their tunnels. Their most advanced technology was their own intellect, honed by generations of observation and trial and error. The construction of these subterranean networks was a monumental undertaking that required a deep understanding of physics, geology, and mathematics, all applied with nothing more than simple hand tools and raw human labor. The primary instrument was the antler pick, a surprisingly effective tool for carving through softer limestone and chalk. For harder rock, they used stone hammers and chisels made of a harder stone like dolerite, patiently pecking away at the surface. Fire setting was another common technique, where workers would light a fire against a rock face to heat it and then suddenly douse it with water, causing the rock to fracture and become easier to break apart. The materials they used were whatever the local environment provided, but they used them with brilliant ingenuity. The Romans, for instance, perfected the use of a specific type of gypsum mortar in their Cryptoporticus. When mixed with water, this mortar would set into an incredibly hard, waterproof seal, ideal for lining underground storage chambers and preventing moisture from ruining stored grain or other goods. But perhaps the most critical innovation was the architectural knowledge needed to prevent these hollowed-out spaces from collapsing under the weight of the world above them. The Romans are famous for their use of the arch, a structure that perfectly distributes weight and allows for the creation of large, open spaces underground. They built these arches out of brick or stone, creating self-supporting tunnels that have remained intact for 2 millennia. In other cultures, like those building the vast underground cities of Cappadocia, they relied on the natural properties of the soft, volcanic tuff rock, which was easy to carve but hardened upon exposure to air, forming its own stable ceiling. The real magic, however, lay in the invisible calculations. How did they ensure that a tunnel dug for water would actually have a consistent, gentle slope over several miles, allowing gravity to do its work? Archaeologists studying the Kanat systems have found that builders used a simple but incredibly precise tool, a long, straight leveling rod placed in the tunnel. By sighting along this rod with a lamp or to a point in a vertical shaft, they could measure minuscule changes in elevation. A slope of just 1 degree over a kilometer could mean a difference in height of over 17 meters, and these engineers managed gradients far more subtle than that, sometimes as little as 1 meter of drop per kilometer of tunnel. This precision was absolutely vital. Too steep a slope would cause erosion and collapse, while too shallow a slope would stop the water's flow entirely. Ventilation was another silent killer that had to be engineered away. Deep, long tunnels could easily become filled with stale air or dangerous gases. The Kanat system cleverly solved this by its very design. The regularly spaced vertical shafts that were used to remove excavated material also acted as natural air vents, creating a constant draft that circulated fresh air through the horizontal tunnel below. For completely sealed environments, like the deep underground grain silos in Mali, builders designed sophisticated pot-in-pot ventilation systems that allowed carbon dioxide to escape without letting in moisture or pests. The ancient Maya demonstrated a different kind of precision with their sakbiob, the hidden white roads that connected their cities. While often above ground, many were built with a sophisticated foundation of crushed limestone and stone supports that acted as a subterranean drainage system, keeping the roadbed dry and stable during heavy rains. Each culture, faced with its own unique set of challenges, arrived at a remarkably sophisticated set of engineering solutions. They turned observation into principle and local materials into lasting monuments, proving that the most advanced tool in any era is the human mind. To witness this incredible ingenuity in action, we need to journey to the heart of the ancient Persian Empire, where one of humanity's most brilliant and enduring hydrological inventions was born, the Kanat. Imagine the vast, sun-scorched Iranian plateau, a land where surface water is a fleeting mirage and rainfall is a rare, unreliable guest. In this seemingly impossible environment, Persian engineers performed what can only be described as hydrological magic. They didn't just find water, they summoned it from deep within the earth and guided it across the desert to create oases of life. The Kanat system was a masterpiece of simple, elegant design. It began with the discovery of a water source, typically an aquifer at the base of a mountain range where snowmelt would seep into the ground. From this mother well, teams of skilled laborers, known as qanats, would begin their painstaking work. They would dig a series of vertical shafts, each one about 20 to 30 meters apart, straight down into the earth. These shafts served as access points for excavation and, crucially, as vents for air circulation. Then came the back-breaking task of connecting the bottoms of these shafts with a gently sloping underground tunnel, often stretching for dozens of kilometers. Using nothing more than hand picks and baskets to remove the earth, these workers would carve their way through rock and soil, guided by an innate understanding of gravity and slope. They used simple tools like weighted strings and sighting rods to maintain the perfect gradient, just enough for the water to flow relentlessly forward, but not so steep that it would erode the tunnel walls and cause a catastrophic collapse. This was not a quick endeavor. A single qanat could take years, even generations, to complete. The work was dangerous, with constant threats of cave-ins and toxic gases, and it was often shrouded in secrecy. The location of a qanat source well was a closely guarded secret, a precious piece of knowledge that could mean the difference between life and death for an entire community, protecting it from sabotage or rival claims. The payoff, however, was nothing short of civilization-altering. Where a qanat emerged at the surface, it created a vibrant oasis. This wasn't just a trickle of water, it was a life-giving artery. The water, having traveled miles underground, was cool, clean, and protected from evaporation. It was channeled into canals to irrigate fields of wheat, barley, dates, and pomegranates, transforming barren desert into lush, productive agricultural land. This abundance didn't just feed people, it fueled empires. Historians point to magnificent urban centers like Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire. The grandeur of its palaces and temples, the sheer scale of its population, was all made possible by a sophisticated network of qanats bringing water from the distant mountains. The food surplus generated by qanat-irrigated farms supported a specialized workforce: artisans, soldiers, administrators, and scholars, freeing them from subsistence farming and paving the way for the cultural and scientific flourishing of Persia's golden age. The scalability of the system was its true genius. A small village might rely on a single, short qanat, while a massive capital city was sustained by a complex web of them. Experts estimate that at its peak, the Persian Empire was crisscrossed by over 50,000 of these underground canals, with a total length exceeding 270,000 kilometers. That's a hidden network long enough to wrap around our planet nearly 7 times. This was not an isolated technology, it was the very bedrock of society, a decentralized, sustainable water grid that allowed communities to thrive in places otherwise written off by nature. The qanat is a powerful testament to how a single, clever adaptation to geography can unlock human potential on an unimaginable scale, proving that sometimes the most profound solutions are not found by conquering the landscape, but by listening to it and working in harmony with its deepest secrets. While the Persians were mastering water in the desert, the Romans were engineering a different kind of subterranean marvel, one designed for the dense, bustling heart of their empire. In cities like Lugdunum, modern-day Lyon, and Nemesis, now Nims, they constructed vast, hidden passageways known as Cryptoporticus. The name itself, from the Greek for hidden and portico, hints at their purpose. These were covered, semi-subterranean galleries, often built into the slopes of hills that created a secret, parallel world beneath the noisy, crowded streets. Far from being dark, damp cellars, these were sophisticated, multi-level structures with vaulted ceilings, often lit by a series of open courtyards or light wells that poured sunshine into the depths while keeping the interior concealed from view. They were the ultimate multi-purpose spaces, a Swiss Army knife of Roman urban planning that solved a dozen different problems at once. Their most immediate function was as a climate-controlled warehouse. The constant, cool temperature of the earth provided natural refrigeration, making these passages ideal for storing vast quantities of grain, olive oil, wine, and other perishable goods that fed the immense urban population. Archaeologists excavating the Cryptoporticus beneath the Forum in Arles found evidence of massive grain storage, with a stable underground environment protecting the city's most vital resource from spoilage, pests, and the threat of fire that constantly loomed above ground. This wasn't just about convenience, it was about security. By stockpiling essentials underground, a city could withstand a siege or a poor harvest without its people facing starvation. The very design of these structures facilitated movement. They allowed goods to be transported from ships on the river directly into the heart of the city's storage facilities, completely out of sight, safe from both the elements and prying eyes. But the Romans, pragmatic as ever, never built something for just one job. These subterranean arcades also served as elegant, shaded promenades for the elite during the scorching heat of a Mediterranean summer. The wealthy patrons who financed their construction would stroll through these cool, spacious halls, conducting business and socializing away from the oppressive sun and the chaotic throngs of the city above. In many cases, these passages directly connected the public forums with the luxurious private villas of the powerful, creating a discrete network for the political and economic elite to move without ever having to mingle with the common citizenry. This dual life, both utilitarian and luxurious, showcases the Roman genius for layering function upon function. Perhaps their most fascinating role, however, was as a strategic asset in times of danger. The Cryptoporticus were often integrated into the city's defensive infrastructure. In the event of an attack or civil unrest, these tunnels provided protected, hidden routes for soldiers to move across the city to reinforce vulnerable points on the walls. They also served as emergency escape routes for officials and, crucially, as secure communication channels. During excavations in Nims, a complex web of these underground passages was discovered linking key administrative buildings, allowing messages and orders to be passed quickly and safely during a crisis, completely bypassing any chaos unfolding in the streets above. This multi-purpose design, part pantry, part shopping mall, part luxury club, and part military installation, underscores a profound understanding of urban resilience. The Romans didn't just build a city, they built a system with built-in redundancy and protection, ensuring that life, commerce, and power could continue to flow even when the world above was threatened. The Cryptoporticus was the silent, sturdy backbone that allowed the magnificent body of the Roman city to stand tall and endure. Of course, these remarkable feats of engineering were not just public works projects. They were often state secrets, guarded as fiercely as any treasure. The very existence of many underground networks was known only to a trusted few, because in a world fraught with conflict and political intrigue, their concealment was their greatest strength. This strategic secrecy transformed what we might see as simple utilities into powerful assets that could determine the outcome of wars and the stability of empires. A hidden water source wasn't just convenient, it was a military advantage that could allow a city to outlast any siege. A subterranean granary wasn't just a storage facility, it was a safeguard against famine that could be kept secret from both enemies and a restless populace. This dual nature, part practical infrastructure, part strategic weapon, is what made these systems so vital to the survival of ancient capitals. We can see this most vividly in the incredible underground cities of Cappadocia in modern-day Turkey. Carved deep into the soft volcanic rock, these are not just a few hidden rooms but entire multi-level metropolises capable of sheltering thousands of people for months at a time. Places like Derinkuyu descend 18 stories underground, complete with living quarters, chapels, stables, wine presses, and even intricate communication systems using wells. But their most defining feature was their defensibility. The entrances were cleverly disguised, often looking like nothing more than a dry well or a small cave in the hillside. Inside, massive, circular stone doors weighing up to half a ton could be rolled across key passages to seal off entire sections from invaders. These were not built for everyday use. They were a last resort, a hidden refuge during the frequent raids that swept across the region. The entire population could vanish underground in a coordinated disappearance, leaving attackers baffled by an eerily empty landscape with no clue where the people or their valuable supplies had gone. This same principle of strategic concealment was mastered on the other side of the world, in ancient China. During the Warring States period and beyond, Chinese generals and engineers developed elaborate networks of hidden tunnels and pathways for military logistics. Known as didao or tunnel warfare tactics, these were not just for surprise attacks. They were primarily supply lines, invisible highways that moved troops, food, and weapons right under the noses of opposing armies. A fortress that appeared isolated and vulnerable on the surface might actually be receiving a constant stream of reinforcements and provisions through a maze of underground tunnels, allowing it to hold out indefinitely. The secrecy surrounding the construction and location of these tunnels was absolute. Historians note that often, the laborers who built them would be relocated or even executed once the project was complete to ensure the knowledge died with them. This extreme measure highlights just how valuable and vulnerable these hidden networks were. As one expert on ancient warfare puts it, a known supply line is a target. A secret supply line is a lifeline. The difference between defeat and victory often lay in who controlled the ground beneath their feet. Beyond outright conflict, secrecy was also a tool for economic and political control. In times of peace, a ruler who monopolized a hidden water source or a concealed grain storage facility could use it to manipulate markets, reward loyalty, or crush dissent by controlling the very basics of life. If your enemies don't know where your resources are stored, they cannot sabotage them or steal them. This ensured a continuous supply for the ruling class and their supporters, cementing their power and creating a form of resilience that was as much about political dominance as it was about communal survival. The hidden network became an instrument of statecraft, a silent partner in maintaining order and projecting power. This fascinating duality shows that these ancient constructions were far more than just clever holes in the ground. They were a profound expression of the human understanding that sometimes, to protect what is most vital, you must hide it in plain sight, or rather, beneath it. Their power was derived from their invisibility, making them one of history's most effective and enduring secret weapons. Of all the resources these hidden networks moved, none was more vital than water. It was the absolute lifeline of any ancient capital, the difference between a thriving metropolis and a ghost town. Without a reliable supply for drinking, for sanitation, and most importantly for agriculture, no city could hope to sustain a large population. But getting that water and managing it wisely presented an epic challenge. Above-ground rivers could be diverted, but they were also vulnerable to contamination, evaporation, and, as we've seen, easy targets for enemies during a siege. The brilliant solution, perfected in various forms across the globe, was to take the entire water system underground, creating a hidden hydrological circuit that functioned with breathtaking efficiency. The Romans, ever the master engineers, are famous for their magnificent aqueducts striding across valleys on towering arches, but some of their most clever work is actually hidden beneath those arches. To maintain a steady downhill gradient for their water channels, they often had to cross deep ravines. Building a bridge high enough was sometimes impossibly expensive or impractical. Their solution was the inverted siphon. This wasn't a simple straw, it was a masterclass in hydraulic engineering. They would run a closed pipe, often made of lead or ceramic, down one side of the valley, across the bottom, and back up the other side. The fundamental principle here is that water seeks its own level. The pressure built up from the water descending the first slope would force it back up the other side, as long as the outlet was lower than the inlet. These siphons could withstand immense pressure, delivering water across obstacles that would have stymied a simple gravity-fed channel, all without a single visible structure disrupting the landscape. It was a hidden force doing the hard work out of sight. For accessing water that was truly deep, few systems are as visually stunning or as socially intricate as the stepwells of India, known as bayoles or valves. While their ornate staircase-lined walls are above ground, they are essentially the magnificent entrance to a subterranean water harvesting system. They functioned like artificial springs, tapping into deep groundwater tables. During the monsoon seasons, rainwater would pour into these massive, cavernous structures, percolating down through the earth to recharge the aquifers below. In the dry seasons, people would descend long, breathtaking flights of steps, sometimes over 10 stories deep, to reach the receding water level, but their genius went beyond mere access. The intricate architecture, often featuring pillared pavilions and shaded galleries at different levels, created a microclimate. The temperature at the bottom could be significantly cooler than the surface, helping to reduce evaporation. These weren't just wells, they were underground community centers, places for ritual, for social gathering, and for respite from the heat, all built around the sacred act of drawing water from the earth's depths. Perhaps no city better exemplifies the strategic storage of water than Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. Sitting on a peninsula, it was vulnerable to siege and could easily have its external water sources cut off. The city's answer was to build a secret world of cisterns beneath its streets. The most famous of these, the Basilica Cistern, is a breathtaking underground palace held up by 336 marble columns, capable of holding 80,000 cubic meters of water. But it was just one of hundreds. These hidden reservoirs collected and stored rainwater channeled from aqueducts and even from the roofs of buildings. This wasn't for daily use. This was a strategic reserve, a bank of liquid security. Historians estimate that at its peak, Constantinople could store enough water underground to support a population of several 100,000 people for an entire year without a single drop of rain or any external supply. This incredible buffer allowed the city to laugh off droughts and withstand prolonged sieges that would have crumbled other capitals. The water was kept fresh and free from algae by being stored in constant darkness and coolness, and some cisterns even used innovative filtration systems with layers of sand and charcoal to purify incoming water. This hidden infrastructure was the true source of the city's legendary resilience, a colossal accomplishment in hydrological management that literally lay beneath the feet of its citizens, mostly unseen and yet absolutely fundamental to their survival. But securing a steady water supply was only half the battle for these ancient metropolises. The other monumental challenge was preserving the enormous quantities of food needed to feed a dense urban population. Without modern refrigeration, how did they stop their hard-won harvests from rotting within weeks? Once again, the solution was right beneath their feet. They discovered that by moving their storage underground, they could tap into the Earth's own natural cooling systems, creating stable, climate-controlled environments that acted as massive, prehistoric refrigerators. The principle is simple yet brilliant. Just a few meters below the surface, the temperature of the ground remains remarkably constant, insulated from the extreme heat of summer and the biting cold of winter. This unchanging, cool, and dark environment was the perfect place to slow down the biological processes that cause food to decay. The Romans institutionalized this idea on a truly industrial scale with buildings known as horia, their public granaries. While many were above ground, the most sophisticated and secure were often partially or fully subterranean. These were not simple dirt cellars. they were feats of architectural planning designed for perfect preservation. The horia featured raised floors to allow air to circulate underneath the stored grain, preventing moisture from seeping up from the ground. Thick, windowless walls made of concrete and brick kept the interior dark and cool, while complex ventilation systems, often using angled shafts, allowed fresh air to flow through without letting in humidity or pests. The result was a storage facility that could keep grain edible for years, not just months. This wasn't just about convenience, it was the cornerstone of Roman economic and political stability. By maintaining a vast, state-controlled grain reserve, the emperor could ensure the city's bread supply was constant, preventing the famines that could so easily spark riots and unrest. The hidden, underground horia were silent guardians of the Pax Romana, their contents as strategically important as any army. This same ingenious use of geology was mastered independently on another continent, in the West African empires of Mali and Ghana. In the ancient city of Geno, archaeologists have uncovered fascinating subterranean granaries, large ceramic pots buried up to their necks in the earth. These pots, known as Granaries, were used to store surplus grains like millet and sorghum. The design was perfectly adapted to the local environment. The surrounding soil acted as a superb insulator, keeping the contents at a steady, cool temperature. The narrow opening at the top, sealed with a clay lid and mud, created an airtight environment that was impenetrable to insects and rodents. This method was so effective that grains could be preserved for multiple seasons, allowing these civilizations to build up a buffer against the unpredictable Sahel droughts. Historians see this as a critical factor in the rise of powerful, complex states in the region. A society that can reliably store food surplus can support a class of artisans, soldiers, and administrators who don't have to farm. It creates wealth, facilitates trade, and provides the security needed for cultural and political expansion. The simple act of burying a pot of grain was, in its own way, a foundational act of empire building. And it wasn't just for dry goods. The ancient world's love affair with wine also depended on these underground havens. Across the Mediterranean, from Greece to Italy, people carved out cool, humid caves or built specialized underground chambers called cellae venarii. These wine cellars provided the ideal conditions for aging amphorae of wine, keeping them at a constant temperature that prevented the vinegar producing bacteria from spoiling the valuable liquid. The humidity prevented the clay seals on the amphorae from drying out and cracking, which would have allowed oxygen to ruin the wine. This ability to preserve and age wine not only improved its taste but transformed it into a stable, tradable commodity that could be shipped across the empire. The underground network, therefore, didn't just preserve food, it preserved wealth and enabled commerce on an unprecedented scale, proving that the path to economic stability was quite literally paved by looking down and harnessing the quiet, consistent power of the earth itself. Now, let's shift our focus from what was stored to how it all moved, because a stockpile is useless if you can't get it to the people who need it. This is where the true genius of these networks as logistical systems comes into sharp focus. They weren't just static storage, they were dynamic, invisible highways buzzing with activity, moving vast quantities of goods and even people, all while remaining completely hidden from the world above. Without the telltale signs of dust clouds from caravans or the ruts of cart roads, these ancient capitals could receive their lifeblood in near total secrecy and with astonishing efficiency. One of the most breathtaking examples of this hidden logistics network was at the heart of the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan. Built on an island in the middle of Lake Texcoco, the city seemed to defy the very logic of supply. How could a metropolis of over 200,000 people, one of the largest in the world at the time, possibly be provisioned without bridges or roads connecting it to the mainland? The answer lay in a stunningly clever adaptation of the landscape. The Aztecs didn't fight the water, they used it. They engineered an extensive network of canals that crisscrossed the city itself, functioning much like Venetian waterways. But the real magic happened beyond the city limits. A series of deliberately maintained subterranean rivers and spring-fed channels flowed beneath the marshy edges of the lake. These hidden waterways were wide and deep enough for shallow draft canoes, the 18-wheelers of the ancient Mesoamerican world. Under the cover of reeds and the natural landscape, fleets of these canoes, operated by a specialized class of traders and porters known as pochteka, would glide silently through these concealed channels. They were loaded with everything the island city needed: maize from the chinampas or floating gardens, obsidian from distant quarries, exquisite feathers for ceremonial headdresses, and exotic goods from empires hundreds of miles away. This system was a logistical masterpiece. It allowed for the continuous, high-volume movement of supplies without the need to build and maintain vulnerable surface roads. The canoes could navigate right into the heart of the city's markets and storage districts, transferring their cargo directly with minimal handling. It was a just-in-time delivery system centuries before the term was invented, all powered by paddle and current, hidden in plain sight. On the other side of the world, the ancient Egyptians demonstrated a different kind of subterranean logistics, one driven not by geography, but by the demands of monumental construction. Building the pyramids and massive temples required moving enormous quantities of stone, sometimes from quarries hundreds of kilometers away. While much was transported on the Nile, the final journey to the sacred building sites often involved moving these multi-ton blocks across the desert. Evidence suggests that the Egyptians may have used a system of hidden, covered corridors or shallow, disguised trenches to facilitate this incredibly difficult task. By creating a controlled, level pathway shielded from the drifting desert sands, they could more effectively use sledges, rollers, and human labor to drag the stones into position. These corridors would have been logistical lifelines, keeping the most critical path clear and predictable, ensuring that the constant stream of materials needed for a pharaoh's eternal project was never interrupted. It was a temporary but vital underground highway dedicated to a single, glorious purpose. Coordinating this kind of movement required more than just engineering. It demanded sophisticated organization. Imagine the scheduling needed to prevent chaos in a narrow, dark tunnel or a hidden canal. Historians believe this was managed through a strict hierarchy of labor and timekeeping. In the Kanat systems of Persia, the water flow itself was often allocated based on a precise calendar, with different villages or farms receiving the right to use the water for specific time windows. This same principle of scheduled access would have been critical for underground transport routes. Specialized overseers would have acted like ancient air traffic controllers, determining which goods went where and when, ensuring that a shipment of grain didn't meet a contingent of soldiers head-on in a passage with no room to pass. The labor force behind this was immense and varied. It wasn't just brute strength. It required skilled pilots to navigate underground canals, knowledgeable guides who memorized the labyrinthine layouts, and trained animals accustomed to working in the dim, confined spaces. This was logistics elevated to an art form, a symphony of coordinated movement playing out in silence and darkness, ensuring that the heartbeat of the city, the flow of its supplies, never missed a beat. Yet to view these networks as merely practical would be to miss a profound layer of their purpose. For many ancient cultures, the act of descending into the earth was not just an engineering task, it was a spiritual journey, a symbolic return to the womb of creation itself. These hidden passages were often seen as liminal spaces, thresholds between the world of the living and the realm of the gods or ancestors, imbued with a sacred significance that transformed them from simple tunnels into hallowed ground. This deep spiritual connection meant that the very act of digging and building was often a religious ritual, and the finished structure served a dual purpose, catering to both the physical and metaphysical needs of the community. We can see this powerful fusion of function and belief in the ancient Minoan civilization on the island of Crete. Here, the famous Labyrinth of Nosos, a sprawling palace complex, is steeped in the myth of the Minotaur, a fearsome half-man, half-bull creature said to dwell in a maze beneath the palace. While the myth is a story, many historians and archaeologists believe it is a symbolic memory of the actual, intricate underground storage magazines and workshops that snake below the palace. For the Minoans, the bull was a sacred animal, a symbol of power and potency, and the act of navigating these confusing subterranean levels may have been part of a coming-of-age ritual or a religious ceremony. Descending into that darkness was not just about retrieving oil or grain. It was a symbolic confrontation with the unknown, a trial that promised spiritual renewal and strength upon return to the surface. The labyrinth was both a practical storage solution and a physical manifestation of a spiritual test, its very walls pulsating with mythological meaning. This concept of the underground as a place of ritual and community is vividly alive in the traditions of many Native American Pueblo peoples, particularly with the Kiva. A Kiva is a circular, wholly or partially underground room, entered through a hole in the roof by means of a ladder. While it served immensely practical roles as a sheltered meeting place, a workshop protected from the elements, and a secure storage area, its primary function was, and for many still is, deeply religious. The Kiva represents the place of emergence, the sipapu, from which the first people entered this world from the previous underworlds according to Pueblo cosmology. When community members descend the ladder into the Kiva, they are symbolically returning to the place of origin, connecting with their ancestors and the foundational powers of the earth. The ceremonies performed within, from prayers for rain to rituals for healing and community bonding, draw their power from this profound connection. The architecture itself is sacred. The enclosed, dark, and earth-bound space creates an intimate atmosphere perfect for meditation, storytelling, and the passing down of traditions, separating participants from the distractions of the outside world and focusing their minds on the spiritual. As one anthropologist notes, the Kiva isn't just in the earth, it is of the earth. It serves as a constant physical reminder that humanity is not separate from nature, but an extension of it, and that our survival depends on honoring that relationship. This symbolism of descent for renewal and protection is a universal archetype found across countless cultures. In ancient Egypt, the journey of the sun god Ra involved traveling through the underworld each night to be reborn each morning, a cycle mirrored in their own burial practices within deep tombs. For the Romans, the mundus, a sacred underground pit believed to be a portal to the underworld, was opened 3 times a year, allowing the spirits of the dead to commune with the living, a practice that blurred the lines between the practical world of the city and the spiritual realm beneath it. Even in the secret tunnels beneath Cappadocia, used primarily for refuge, archaeologists have found beautifully carved churches and chapels, indicating that even in times of extreme danger, people felt compelled to sanctify their subterranean shelters, to call upon divine protection from the very rock that hid them. This intertwining of the spiritual and the practical reveals a fundamental truth about these ancient societies. They did not compartmentalize their world into the sacred and the secular. A water channel was not just a conduit for H2O, it was a vein of life, perhaps blessed by a water deity. A grain storage chamber was not just a pantry, it was a testament to the earth's generosity, a gift to be managed with gratitude and respect. This holistic world, you enriched their engineering marvels with a layer of meaning that transcended mere survival, turning their hidden networks into sacred landscapes that nourished both the body and the soul. For centuries, these vast underground networks were the stuff of legend, whispered about in historical texts and local folklore, but largely lost to the world above. That all began to change when the spades of archaeologists started to uncover the truth, revealing that these hidden worlds were not myth, but magnificent reality. One of the most thrilling modern revelations has been the ongoing mapping of subterranean Rome. While the Roman catacombs have been known for ages, recent projects using laser scanning and three-dimensional modeling have revealed a shocking density of forgotten spaces. Archaeologists aren't just finding isolated tunnels, they're uncovering a multi-layered underground city that mirrors the one above. They've mapped ancient aqueduct conduits running silently beneath modern apartments, long-sealed Cryptoporticus stretching under piazzas, and even the hidden Favasi secret pits where temple priests would carefully store old, sacred statues that were too revered to simply throw away. Each discovery is a time capsule, offering a raw, unfiltered look into the logistical and spiritual daily life of the ancient Romans. The sense of discovery is even more palpable in the jungles of Central America. For generations, the ancient Maya were thought to have relied on above-ground causeways called sakbiob, but recent explorations have revealed something far more astonishing: a vast, interconnected network of underground waterways and tunnels beneath the city of Tikal and other major centers. Dubbed Mayan subways by some researchers, these narrow, carved stone passages were designed to channel rainwater from grand plazas into enormous, hidden reservoirs called choltons. The real breakthrough came when archaeologists, battling thick roots and cramped conditions, navigated these dark channels and found them not just empty, but often containing ritual offerings, perfectly preserved ceramic vessels, jade carvings, and even evidence of food left centuries ago. This proved these weren't just utilitarian drains, they were considered sacred veins in the body of the city, integral to both survival and cosmology. The discovery completely reshaped our understanding of how the Maya managed water and sustained their large populations through seasonal droughts. These finds are no longer just the result of back-breaking digging and lucky breaks. Modern technology has given us a new set of eyes to see through the Earth itself. The true game changer has been ground-penetrating radar, or GPR. This technology works like a sonar for solid ground, sending radio waves into the Earth and reading the signals that bounce back from buried structures. It allows archaeologists to map entire subterranean complexes with incredible precision without ever breaking ground. In Turkey, GPR surveys have recently revealed previously unknown levels and entire new sections of the Derinkuyu underground city, suggesting the refuge was capable of holding far more people than anyone initially believed. Similarly, in Egypt, scans around the Giza Plateau have hinted at massive, unexplored voids and passageways deep beneath the sand, sparking exciting debates about what might still lie hidden near the pyramids. This non-invasive technology is like giving historians a key to a locked door, allowing them to peer into the past without risking damage to these fragile, ancient sites. It bridges the gap between past and present, proving that the age of exploration is far from over. We are simply exploring in new, incredible ways. Every ping from the radar is a potential mystery waiting to be solved, a story waiting to be told, ensuring that the awe of discovery remains as powerful today as it was for the first archaeologist who stumbled into a hidden chamber by the light of a flickering torch. What's truly remarkable is that this drive to build downward wasn't confined to one corner of the globe. It was a universal impulse, a brilliant answer to universal problems that emerged independently across continents and cultures. When we place these incredible achievements side by side, a fascinating pattern emerges, one that reveals a shared thread of human ingenuity weaving through history, proving that when faced with a common challenge, brilliant minds often arrive at startlingly similar solutions, even when separated by thousands of miles and years. Let's take a journey across the ancient world and compare a few of these marvels. Consider the scale of these projects. In Cappadocia, Turkey, we find the mind-boggling underground city of Derinkuyu. This wasn't just a tunnel, it was a veritable metropolis carved deep into the soft volcanic rock, capable of sheltering an estimated 20,000 people along with their livestock and food stores. It descended an astonishing 18 levels, complete with schools, churches, wineries, and even complex ventilation shafts that reached down to a subterranean river. Its primary purpose was sheer survival, a hidden refuge from invading armies and religious persecution. Now shift your gaze to ancient China, particularly during the turbulent Warring States period. Here, the scale was different, but the strategic thinking was identical. Vast networks of tunnels, known as didao, were dug not for permanent habitation, but for military maneuverability. These hidden passages allowed entire armies to move, communicate, and launch surprise attacks from directly beneath their enemies' feet. The scale was measured not in depth, but in sheer tactical reach, turning the very ground into a weapon. The purpose behind these constructions also showcases both divergence and stunning convergence. The Persian Kanat system was a masterpiece of peaceful, sustainable development. Its sole purpose was to give life, to channel water across a desert and create agricultural abundance where none should exist. It was a project of community and cooperation, often taking generations to complete. Contrast that with the Cryptoporticus of the Roman world. Yes, they stored grain and provided cool promenades, but they were also instruments of power and control. They were discrete pathways for the elite, secure military communication lines, and a means to stabilize an economy, and by extension, political power through hidden granaries. One system was about creating life, the other about protecting and controlling a way of life. Yet, both were profound responses to their environmental and social pressures. The innovations they developed, while unique in their execution, all speak to a deep understanding of physics and geology. The builders of Derinkuyu used the natural properties of tough rock, which is soft to carve but hardens when exposed to air, to create their stable, multi-story city. They engineered massive, rolling stone doors to seal passages and intricate wells for water and air. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the ancient Chinese tunnel engineers were pioneers in structural reinforcement, using wood framing and baked clay bricks to prevent collapses in their often hasty military excavations. And we cannot forget the native North American cultures of the American Southwest, like the ancestral Puebloans, who constructed sophisticated underground ceremonial chambers called Kivas. These structures featured a small, sipapu hole in the floor, symbolizing the portal from which their ancestors emerged, and a complex airflow system using a deflector shield and ventilation shaft to manage the oxygen for the sacred fire burned inside. Different materials, different designs, but the same brilliant application of fundamental engineering principles. Historians see this global phenomenon not as a coincidence, but as a powerful example of what's called independent invention. It's the idea that different societies, when confronted with similar environmental pressures or societal needs, like defense, water scarcity, or the need for sacred space, will arrive at similar technological solutions without any contact with each other. An expert in ancient technology might put it this way: When the problem is the desert, the answer is often to go underground for water. When the problem is an invading army, the answer is often to go underground for safety. The human mind, in its quest for survival, follows a logical path, and that path frequently leads down. This comparative view doesn't diminish any one achievement, it elevates them all. It shows us that the drive to innovate, to reshape our world to meet our needs, is a fundamental part of the human story. From the defensive depths of Turkey to the life-giving canals of Persia and the strategic tunnels of China, these hidden networks are a testament to a universal truth. Ingenuity has always been humanity's greatest natural resource. This ability to move resources unseen was the key that unlocked a new chapter in human history, the rise of the truly massive ancient capital. These hidden networks did more than just solve immediate problems of scarcity or security. They fundamentally rewrote the rules of urban planning, allowing cities to grow to sizes that were previously unimaginable, breaking free from the natural limits imposed by their local geography. Before these innovations, a city's population ceiling was brutally simple. It couldn't exceed the number of people that could be fed and watered by the land immediately around it. If a drought hit or a siege began, that ceiling came crashing down. But with a subterranean supply system, a city was no longer tethered to its immediate surroundings. It could draw sustenance from distant mountains, store years of surplus beneath its streets, and create an invisible buffer against disaster. This wasn't just growth, it was a quantum leap in what a human settlement could become. Take ancient Rome, the world's first megalopolis. At its peak, historians estimate its population soared to over 1 million inhabitants. For centuries, scholars have marveled at how such an immense city could be sustained in the ancient world. The answer lies beneath the bustling streets. The visible marvels, the aqueducts, are just the tip of the iceberg. It was the hidden, underground distribution network that truly powered the city. Once the aqueduct water reached the city, it was channeled into a complex subterranean grid of lead and ceramic pipes that fed into public fountains, bathhouses, and even the private homes of the wealthy. This ensured that even the most densely packed neighborhoods had access to fresh water for drinking and, crucially, for the extensive public baths that were central to Roman life and hygiene. This underground water grid was a public health miracle, preventing the waterborne diseases that would have otherwise ravaged such a dense population. But water was only part of the equation. Below the famous forums and temples lay the Horia, the massive underground granaries. By storing a vast surplus of grain imported from Egypt and North Africa in these cool, stable, subterranean vaults, the Roman state created a food bank that could weather any storm, a poor harvest, a disruption in shipping, or political unrest. This guaranteed food supply, the ancient equivalent of social security, was what kept 1 million people from starving and rioting. It allowed Rome to become a consumer city on an unprecedented scale, where a huge percentage of the population was freed from farming to become soldiers, artisans, bureaucrats, and artists, fueling the engine of the empire itself. The city's above-ground grandeur, its colosseums, its temples, its palaces was entirely dependent on the unseen, utilitarian world thriving beneath it. On an entirely different continent, we see the same principle at work in the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. Built on an island in the middle of a lake, the city should have been severely constrained by its lack of land. Yet it grew to support a population of nearly 200,000 people, a rival to any major European city of its time. How? Through a masterful re-engineering of its entire ecosystem, both above and below the waterline. The famous chinampas, or floating gardens, were the agricultural heart of the city, but they were irrigated by a hidden aquatic network of spring-fed channels, and carefully managed subterranean water flows that kept the lake's saline and fresh waters in a perfect balance. More importantly, this labyrinth of waterways functioned as the city's invisible highway system. Canoes laden with food and goods from the Chinampas and from tribute states across the empire could glide silently through these channels directly into the heart of the city's markets without the need for a single bridge or paved road. This eliminated the logistical nightmare of unloading and reloading goods at a dock, allowing for a constant, high-volume flow of supplies that fed the massive population with breathtaking efficiency. The city's planners even built sophisticated dikes and causeways with hidden floodgates that controlled water levels and prevented flooding, a form of subterranean civil engineering that kept the city dry and habitable. Tenochtitlan wasn't just built on a lake, it was integrated with it, its lifeblood flowing through a hidden, aquatic circulatory system that allowed it to punch far above its weight, becoming the dominant power center in Mesoamerica. This leads us to a fascinating urban design principle employed by these ancient planners: strategic zoning. They intuitively understood that different city functions belonged in different layers. The above-ground level was for public life, for display, for ceremony, and for daily commerce, the vibrant, chaotic world of forums, temples, and markets. But the crucial, utilitarian functions that supported that vibrant life were systematically relegated underground. Storage, waste management, utility distribution, and secure transportation were all hidden from view. This wasn't just about secrecy, it was about efficiency and space saving. By moving the guts of the city, its plumbing, its pantries, its backstage logistics below the surface, they freed up precious above-ground real estate for housing, public buildings, and open spaces. This prevented the oppressive overcrowding and industrial blight that often characterizes modern cities struggling with density. It created a cleaner, more aesthetically pleasing, and more organized urban environment. The underground layer became the city's functional basement, its mechanical room, its warehouse district, all rolled into one. This clear separation of layers is a masterclass in urban planning that we are only now, in the modern era with our subways and utility tunnels, beginning to fully appreciate and replicate. The ancient world understood that for a city to breathe and thrive above, it needed a strong, silent, and deeply buried backbone below. For all their brilliance, these subterranean networks were not infallible miracles of engineering. They existed in a constant, delicate balance with the earth itself, and their builders were perpetually at war with a host of formidable challenges. The risk of catastrophic structural failure was a terrifying and ever-present reality. In the soft, tough rock of Cappadocia, the very material that made carving so easy could also become its greatest weakness. There are historical accounts, supported by archaeological evidence, of entire sections of the multi-level cities collapsing, likely triggered by earthquakes or simply the immense cumulative pressure from the city above. A collapse wasn't just a repair job. It could mean entombing entire families, destroying precious food stores, and rendering critical escape routes useless. The air they breathed down there could also turn against them. In the deepest qanats of Persia, workers and maintenance crews sometimes faced a silent, invisible killer. Pockets of suffocating carbon dioxide or toxic gases like hydrogen sulfide that could accumulate in poorly ventilated sections, leading to asphyxiation without any warning. Water, the very resource these systems were designed to harness, could also become a devastating agent of destruction. The most common and recurring nightmare was flooding. A sudden, unusually heavy rainstorm could overwhelm the carefully calculated capacity of a drainage tunnel or cistern. In ancient Jerusalem, archaeologists have found evidence of sudden, massive silt deposits in Hezekiah's tunnel, suggesting a catastrophic flash flood that roared through the narrow passage, likely sweeping away anyone inside unable to escape in time. In Rome, despite their advanced hydraulic engineering, lead pipes could burst and aqueduct channels could crack, causing underground floods that eroded foundations and destabilized buildings above. And then there was the constant, insidious threat of contamination. A crack in the lining of a cistern or a breach where a sewer crossed a freshwater channel could lead to outbreaks of waterborne diseases like dysentery or cholera, turning the city's lifeblood into a poison that could decimate a population from within. An expert in ancient infrastructure notes, "We often see their successes, but the archaeological record is also full of repairs, patches, and abandoned tunnels." Every generation had to fight to keep these systems functioning. It was a never-ending battle against the physics of the planet. The economic and human costs of this battle were staggering. The initial construction of a Kanat or a major Cryptoporticus was a monumental investment, often funded by the state or a wealthy patron, and it consumed lifetimes of labor. Maintaining them was an even greater, ongoing drain on resources. Keeping tunnels clear of silt and debris was a relentless, dirty, and dangerous job, often falling to a specialized class of workers who inherited the trade. In Persia, the muqani were highly respected for their skills but also lived with the constant danger of tunnel collapses and gas poisoning. The social cost was equally profound. There is compelling evidence that much of this brutal labor, particularly for the Romans, was performed by enslaved people, a vast, unseen workforce that literally bore the weight of the city on their backs in dark, dangerous conditions to maintain the comfort and security of the elite above ground. This hidden human toll is the shadow side of these engineering marvels. Yet, human ingenuity refused to be defeated by these challenges. Each vulnerability sparked a new wave of innovation. To combat structural collapse, Roman engineers developed increasingly sophisticated forms of reinforcement, using networks of brick arches and buttresses to distribute weight more effectively underground, a technique still used in modern tunneling. The builders of Derinkuyu addressed the threat of being sealed in during an attack by creating dozens of independently sealed sections with their own massive stone doors, ensuring that a breach in one area wouldn't doom the entire city. To mitigate the risk of water contamination, many cultures developed early filtration systems. The Maya, for instance, used zeolite sand in their reservoir beds, a crystalline mineral that naturally filters out harmful bacteria and toxins, a technology not rediscovered in the West until the 20th century. And for the ever-present problem of maintenance, societies developed complex legal codes and social structures. The allocation of water from a qanat, for example, was often tied to an obligation to contribute labor or resources to its upkeep, creating a shared responsibility that ensured the system's survival for centuries. This constant cycle of problem and solution, of collapse and reinforcement, shows that these networks were not static monuments but dynamic, evolving systems. Their true genius lies not in their perfection, but in their resilience, in the relentless, adaptive spirit that kept them functioning against all odds, generation after generation. It might seem like these ancient subterranean systems belong solely to the past, fascinating relics of a bygone era. But look closer at the cutting edge of modern engineering and urban planning, and you'll find a surprising truth. The past is actively prototyping our future. Today's innovators are increasingly turning to these time-tested solutions, recognizing that the old ways often hold the key to solving our most pressing modern problems, from water scarcity to urban congestion. The principles mastered by Persian muqanis and Roman engineers are being rediscovered and repurposed, proving that true ingenuity is indeed timeless. Consider the urgent global challenge of water security, particularly in arid regions. The ancient Kanat system, with its elegant use of gravity and subterranean conveyance to prevent evaporation, is experiencing a dramatic revival. In places like dry regions of Arizona and Oman, modern engineers are constructing new versions of these underground channels, sometimes called subsurface dams or groundwater tapping tunnels. They're not using hand picks and baskets, of course. Construction involves sophisticated drilling equipment and geological surveys to map aquifers with precision. But the core principle remains identical. Intercept groundwater at the foothills of mountains and transport it for miles in a buried, protected tunnel to where it's needed for agriculture and drinking. The motivation is powerfully contemporary. As one water resource engineer working on such a project in Morocco noted, "We're fighting climate change with every tool we have." The Kanat isn't just a historical artifact, it's a zero-energy, zero-emission water distribution system. It was sustainable 1,000 years ago, and it's perhaps even more sustainable now. We're not reinventing the wheel, we're just fitting it with modern tires. This ancient technology offers a powerful alternative to energy-intensive desalination plants and deep well pumping, providing a climate-resilient water source that is immune to the scorching sun. The concept of moving goods underground to free up congested surface space is another ancient idea finding vibrant new life. The Romans used their Cryptoporticus to discreetly move supplies beneath crowded forums. Today, major metropolises are exploring the exact same logic on a massive scale. The most prominent example is Chicago's ongoing project to develop an underground freight tunnel system. The goal is to remove thousands of diesel trucks from the city's streets by shifting their cargo to electric autonomous carts running through a network of tunnels deep below the traffic. This would drastically reduce surface-level pollution, noise, and congestion while dramatically improving delivery efficiency. The parallels to the hidden logistics of Tenochtitlan or the storage tunnels of Rome are striking. A civil engineer involved in the planning stages explained, "The Romans understood that the most efficient way to manage a dense urban environment is to create a separate, dedicated layer for utilities and logistics." We're finally catching up to that 2,000-year-old insight. It's not about inventing something new, it's about applying an ancient urban planning principle with 21st-century technology. This approach is being studied by cities from London to Singapore, all seeking to decongest their surface streets by looking downward for solutions. Beyond specific technologies, the entire philosophy of these ancient networks is influencing the modern green building movement. The passive temperature regulation achieved by underground storage is a cornerstone of contemporary sustainable architecture. Modern buildings are increasingly incorporating earth-sheltered designs, green roofs, and subterranean thermal labyrinths, essentially updated versions of the Roman Horia or the Malian Granaries. These designs use the Earth's constant temperature to naturally heat and cool structures, slashing the enormous energy demands of conventional air conditioning and heating systems. Furthermore, the ancient practice of rainwater harvesting, perfected through underground cisterns in Constantinople and stepwells in India, is now a standard feature of eco-friendly design. Architects are seamlessly integrating large subsurface storage tanks into their plans to capture rainwater for irrigation and non-potable uses, reducing the strain on municipal water supplies. This holistic embrace of subterranean strategies demonstrates a profound shift in perspective. We are moving away from seeing the ground as merely a foundation to build upon, and starting to see it as an active partner in creating more resilient and efficient habitats. The enduring legacy of these ancient networks isn't just in the tunnels themselves, but in the powerful, enduring idea that sometimes the most advanced path forward is to look back, and to look down. Perhaps the most powerful lesson these ancient networks offer is a masterclass in working with nature's existing forces rather than fighting against them with brute force and energy. They achieved remarkable feats of engineering not by overpowering the environment, but by listening to it and leveraging its natural rhythms. The gravity-fed Kanat system is the ultimate example. For centuries, we've used powerful electric or diesel pumps to pull water from deep aquifers and push it across landscapes, a process that consumes immense amounts of energy and depletes groundwater at an unsustainable rate. The Kanat, by contrast, uses no external power whatsoever. It simply taps into the hydrological cycle and lets gravity, a constant and free force, do all the work. The water flows effortlessly from the mountain aquifer to the desert plain, cooled and protected from evaporation by its subterranean journey. This isn't just a historical curiosity. It's a blueprint for a circular, zero-carbon water system that modern engineers are now desperately trying to replicate with complex and expensive technology. The ancient builders understood efficiency in its purest form, achieving maximum output with minimal input, a principle we are only now rediscovering in our quest for sustainability. This philosophy of minimal surface disruption is another critical takeaway. The sprawling above-ground infrastructure of the modern world, highways, pipelines, power lines, fragments ecosystems, displaces wildlife and consumes vast tracts of land. The ancient approach of going underground presents a compelling alternative. By burying their crucial supply lines, these civilizations left the surface largely undisturbed for agriculture, nature, and human settlement. The landscape above a Kanat could remain a pristine desert or a working farm, with no indication of the life-giving river flowing silently beneath it. This wasn't just an aesthetic choice, it was a form of passive environmental protection. It prevented the erosion that plagues open canals, protected water quality from surface contaminants, and preserved the natural habitat. In an era where we are increasingly conscious of our urban footprint and the loss of green space, this idea of multi-layered land use is incredibly relevant. Why sacrifice precious surface land for unsightly logistics hubs or storage facilities when we can, as our ancestors did, build down instead of out, preserving the natural world above? Nowhere is this ancient wisdom being revived more directly than in the modern practice of rainwater harvesting. The massive underground cisterns of Constantinople, which could hold enough water to sustain the city for a year, are the direct ancestors of the large-scale subsurface storage tanks being integrated into green buildings and sustainable communities today. In places like Singapore and Tucson, Arizona, new developments are mandated to capture rainwater from roofs and pavements, channeling it not into storm drains that lead to pollution and flooding, but into vast underground cisterns. This water is then used for irrigation, flushing toilets, and even cooling systems, drastically reducing the demand on municipal water supplies. This is precisely the same system that allowed the Maya to thrive in the seasonal rainforests of Mesoamerica using their choltons, and it's a powerful demonstration of closing the water loop locally, just as they did. It's a shift from a linear model of take-use, dispose to a circular one of capture-store-use, and it's a concept that is thousands of years old. So what does this mean for us today, facing down the immense challenges of climate change and resource depletion? It forces us to ask some profound and reflective questions. In our rush toward high-tech geoengineering solutions, have we overlooked the elegant, low-tech wisdom right under our feet? Could the answer to megadroughts lie not in building more energy-intensive desalination plants on the coast, but in reviving and adapting the principles of the Kanat to recharge our depleting aquifers from the mountains? As our cities become denser and more congested, Should we not look to the Roman model of multi-layered urban planning, creating subterranean freight and utility corridors to free our surface streets for people and green space? The genius of these ancient systems lies in their holistic thinking. They didn't see water, food, transport, and shelter as separate problems to be solved in isolation with specialized technology. They saw them as interconnected parts of a single system, the system of human survival, and they designed their infrastructure accordingly. That integrated, systemic perspective, which considers the long-term relationship between a society and its environment, may be the most valuable and urgently needed lesson they have to teach us. Their legacy isn't just a collection of old tunnels. It's a different way of seeing the world, one where we are not conquerors of nature, but its most ingenious students. Beyond the obvious benefits of survival and security, these hidden networks unlocked something equally powerful: immense economic potential. By creating secure, invisible channels for the movement of goods, they transformed ancient capitals into thriving commercial hubs, fostering trade networks that were both resilient and remarkably efficient. Imagine a merchant caravan traveling a well-known surface road. It's a slow, vulnerable procession, exposed to the elements, desperate bandits lurking in the hills, and the heavy hand of local lords demanding tolls and tariffs at every pass. Now picture the alternative: valuable goods moving silently through a protected underground passage or along a concealed canal, arriving directly into the heart of a city's secure storage district, their journey unseen and their value undiminished by pilferage or taxation. This was the hidden economy in action, a clandestine circulatory system that pumped wealth directly into the city's core. The rock-carved city of Petra in modern-day Jordan offers a stunning example of this principle. Famous for its breathtaking temples' facades carved directly into rose-red cliffs, Petra's true genius was its hidden hydrology. The Nabateans, the desert traders who built it, engineered a complex network of underground cisterns, dams, and water conduits that allowed them to control and conserve every precious drop of water in an arid environment. This hidden water system was the foundation of their economic miracle. It enabled Petra to become a lavish oasis and a vital rest stop on the major incense trade routes. Merchants traveling from Arabia to the Mediterranean could rely on Petra not just for water, but for a secure, climate-controlled environment. Many scholars believe that the vast, naturally cool subterranean chambers found throughout the city, often hidden behind grand facades, functioned as secure warehouses and even underground marketplaces where high-value goods like silk, spices, and incense could be stored and traded safe from the scorching desert sun and prying eyes. The city's wealth wasn't just displayed in its magnificent architecture. It was protected and multiplied in the cool, dark spaces beneath it. This concept of the underground as an economic stabilizer was perfected by the Romans with their state-controlled horia, the massive granaries we discussed earlier. But their economic function went far beyond simple storage. By stockpiling a vast surplus of grain in these subterranean vaults, the Roman state effectively created the ancient world's most powerful strategic reserve. In times of plenty, they would buy up grain, supporting farmers and stabilizing prices. When a poor harvest struck or a siege began, they could release this stored grain onto the market, preventing price gouging and famine. This system acted as a powerful buffer against the wild fluctuations that could cripple an ancient economy and ignite social unrest. An expert in ancient economics explains, the Roman grain dole wasn't just charity, it was a sophisticated tool of macroeconomic policy. By controlling the supply of the most basic commodity, the state could smooth out economic shocks, maintain the spending power of the urban populace, and ensure the continued operation of all the other markets in the city. The underground Horia were the physical manifestation of this policy, the battery that stored economic energy for a rainy day. This allowed Rome to become a stable, predictable market, which in turn attracted more traders and more wealth, creating a powerful cycle of economic growth that was all underpinned by what lay beneath the streets. The benefits also extended to the most fundamental driver of commerce, the reduction of transaction costs. When goods could be moved securely and directly from a ship on the Tiber River into a hidden Cryptoporticus beneath a forum, the costs associated with that transfer plummeted. There were fewer losses from theft and spoilage, no need to pay for armed guards for the final leg of a journey, and less damage from exposure to the elements. This efficiency made goods cheaper and more plentiful for everyone in the city, from the richest senator to the poorest laborer. Furthermore, these hidden routes allowed for a level of discreet commerce that was invaluable in the politically charged ancient world. A rival faction could not easily intercept a secret shipment of weapons or gold moving through an underground passage. A merchant could avoid the exorbitant taxes of one region by using a forgotten tunnel network, increasing his profit margin and making his goods more competitive. This ability to operate outside the official, above-ground channels provided a crucial layer of economic flexibility and resilience, allowing trade to continue even when surface routes were compromised by war, political instability, or natural disaster. The underground network, therefore, wasn't just a physical conduit for goods. It was a shield that protected the very mechanisms of commerce, ensuring that the economic heartbeat of the city continued to pulse steadily, even when the world above was in chaos. Behind every meter of tunnel and every stone laid in these vast underground networks was a human story, a complex tapestry of labor, skill, and social organization that is often overshadowed by the engineering marvels themselves. To truly understand these systems, we must shift our gaze from the grandeur of the architecture to the people who made it possible, uncovering a world where communal spirit and brutal exploitation often existed side by side. The labor force was never a monolith. It was a carefully structured hierarchy, a pyramid of effort that stretched from the most brilliant master engineers down to the countless anonymous hands that moved the earth. At the apex were the visionaries, the architects and hydrologists whose knowledge was passed down through generations. In Persia, these were the muqanats, the master Kanat diggers who could read the landscape, identifying the precise location of an aquifer and calculating the perfect, gravity-driven slope for a tunnel that might run for dozens of kilometers. Their knowledge was a closely guarded secret, a form of intellectual capital as valuable as the water itself. They were highly respected, well-compensated members of society, often traveling from village to village as consultants, their skills in constant demand. But the actual work of excavation was a different story entirely. For the massive state-sponsored projects of empires like Rome or Persia, this backbreaking labor was frequently performed by enslaved people, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals. Theirs was a life of unimaginable hardship, spent in stifling, dark, and dangerous conditions with only the most basic tools. They worked with antler picks and stone hammers, hauling baskets of earth and rock up through narrow vertical shafts, all while facing the ever-present threats of tunnel collapse, suffocation from poor air quality, or flash floods. In Rome, the construction and maintenance of the vast subterranean horia and aqueduct conduits were infamous for their high mortality rates, a cost the state was willing to pay for the sake of urban security and grandeur. This stark division reminds us that these wonders of the ancient world were built on a foundation that was often profoundly unjust, with the comfort and security of the elite above ground being purchased with the suffering of an unseen underclass below. Yet there is another, more uplifting side to this story, one that reveals the power of collective action. In many smaller communities, particularly in the construction of regional qanat systems across Persia, the work was a monumental communal effort. The entire village had a vested interest in the project's success. Their very survival depended on it. Here, the project became a powerful social glue. Every able-bodied person would contribute according to their ability. The young and strong would do the digging, while others would prepare food, make tools, haul away debris, or care for the children of the workers. This created a powerful sense of shared purpose and mutual dependence. The knowledge of construction and maintenance wasn't hoarded by an elite few, but was shared and taught within the community, ensuring its survival for future generations. The finished qanat was not owned by a king or a wealthy landowner. It was a common resource with water rights and maintenance duties carefully allocated by a council of elders. This fostered a profound sense of collective ownership and responsibility, a brilliant early example of sustainable communal resource management that strengthened the social fabric for centuries. This duality between forced labor and communal cooperation highlights the complex social dynamics these projects engendered. On one hand, they could be instruments of incredible exploitation, reinforcing rigid social hierarchies and expending human lives as a disposable resource for imperial ambition. The pharaohs of Egypt, for instance, mobilized vast workforces, often through corvée labor, a system where citizens were compelled to contribute a certain number of days of work to state projects. While not always slavery, it was still a form of coercion that leveraged the power of the state to commandeer human effort on a colossal scale. On the other hand, these same projects could be powerful engines of social mobility and skill development. A talented worker who showed aptitude for engineering or organization could rise through the ranks, gaining status and a better life for his family. The Roman military, for example, was full of skilled engineers who learned their trade building roads, bridges, and siege works, and who would have been instrumental in designing and supervising the construction of complex underground infrastructure for the empire. The human element adds a necessary and poignant dimension to our understanding. These networks were not sterile, impersonal machines. They were born from sweat, ingenuity, and sometimes immense sacrifice. They were sites of both brutal oppression and inspiring cooperation. They required not just technical knowledge, but a sophisticated understanding of how to organize and motivate thousands of people towards a single, monumental goal. This reminds us that the greatest challenge these ancient societies faced may not have been the engineering itself, but the complex human algebra of coordinating collective effort. The silent, dark tunnels we marvel at today echo with the voices of the countless individuals who built them, a testament to the fact that history's most enduring monuments are always, ultimately, a story about people. But beyond their stone and mortar, these hidden worlds gave birth to something even more enduring, a rich tapestry of myth and legend that wove the practical into the magical. For the people who lived above them, these dark, inaccessible passages were not just engineering projects. They were gateways to the unknown, fertile ground for the imagination to explain what the eye could not see. Folklore began to cling to these structures like moss, transforming them from utilitarian tunnels into realms of hidden treasure, powerful deities, and supernatural guardians. This was the human mind's way of making sense of the profound mystery lying just beneath their feet, a process that often served a surprising and very practical purpose: protection. Consider the rolling hills of Britain, where the ancient chalk tunnels and flint mines of the Neolithic era faded from memory, only to be resurrected in the grand tales of King Arthur and his knights. These subterranean hollows became woven into the legend of Avalon, the mystical island, and the stories of Merlin the wizard. Some local traditions spoke of hidden caves beneath places like Glastonbury Tor, where Arthur and his knights lay sleeping, awaiting the hour of Britain's greatest need. This mythologizing did more than just entertain. It created a powerful cultural taboo. To disturb these sites was to risk awakening or angering the legendary heroes and powerful magic slumbering within. This supernatural deterrence likely protected these ancient underground spaces from casual plunder and vandalism for centuries, preserving them in a way that mere physical barriers never could. The legend became the lock and the story became the key. This protective power of myth is seen even more vividly in the traditions of many indigenous cultures. For the Hopi and other Pueblo peoples of the American Southwest, the underground isn't a place of fear, but of sacred emergence. Their creation stories tell of journeying through a series of subterranean worlds before finally entering this one through a hole in the earth, the Sipapu. This profound connection means that caves and underground springs are not simply geological features. They are living spiritual entities, the homes of ancestral spirits and powerful earth deities known as Katsanam. To exploit such a place for mere water or mineral wealth would be an unthinkable sacrilege, a violation of a cosmic order. An anthropologist studying these beliefs explains, the Western mind sees a resource to be managed. The indigenous worldview often sees a relative to be respected. When a spring is seen as the home of a spirit, its protection is automatic, inherent, and woven into the very fabric of cultural identity. The myth doesn't just explain the world, it prescribes how to live in it. This spiritual safeguarding ensured that these vital water sources and underground refuges were conserved, not through legislation, but through deeply held belief. Of course, not all tales were so benevolent. Across Europe, a common thread of folklore warned of dangerous creatures dwelling in underground places. In Germany, tales of the kobold, a mischievous and sometimes malevolent gnome, were often associated with mines. Miners would blame the kobold for cave-ins, toxic air, and the disappointing veins of ore that turned out to be worthless cobalt, a metal that even takes its name from the creature. These stories served as a pre-scientific way to explain very real and ever-present dangers. Before the understanding of underground gases or structural geology, it was the kobold who caused a tunnel to collapse. The myth created a framework of caution and respect for the underground environment, discouraging reckless behavior and encouraging rituals meant to appease the unseen forces at work. The line between superstition and safety protocol was beautifully and effectively blurred. This fascinating interplay between mystery and reality ensured the survival of these networks in another crucial way. Tales of cursed treasures or dragons guarding subterranean hoards weren't just fireside entertainment. They were a highly effective security system. In a world without police forces or surveillance, a well-circulated story about a terrible fate befalling anyone who entered a certain tunnel was a powerful deterrent against looters and trespassers. The very secrecy that surrounded the construction of these places meant to protect them from enemies naturally bred speculation and fear among the local populace. A forgotten Cryptoporticus entrance discovered by a farmer could quickly become the entrance to the underworld in local gossip, ensuring it was given a wide berth. In this way, the legends that grew from the shadows of these structures became their most loyal and enduring guardians, long after the original architects and their intended purpose had been forgotten. The stories ensured that the physical reality was left undisturbed, waiting centuries for archaeologists to arrive and swap the language of myth for the language of science, revealing the incredible human ingenuity that had inspired the awe all along. Yet for all their resilience against ancient sieges and the passage of centuries, these subterranean wonders now face a new array of threats that their original builders could never have anticipated. The very progress of the modern world is, ironically, placing these timeless achievements in greater peril than ever before. One of the most immediate and relentless dangers comes from urban development itself. As cities expand upward with skyscrapers and downward with parking garages, subway lines, and fiber optic cable trenches, they constantly risk cutting through and collapsing these fragile ancient structures. In Rome, the constant hum of vibration from traffic on modern roads is gradually shaking apart the delicate mortar and brickwork of underground horia that have stood for 2,000 years. In fast-growing metropolises across the Middle East and Asia, new construction projects often proceed without thorough archaeological surveys, sometimes discovering, and unfortunately, sometimes destroying ancient Kanat shafts and tunnels only when the backhoes have already done their damage. The pressure for housing and infrastructure is immense, and without careful planning and legal protection, these irreplaceable historical layers are being lost forever, paved over by the very civilizations that inherited them. Adding to this man-made pressure is the slow, insidious impact of climate change, which is altering the very environmental conditions that these systems were designed to manage. For qanats and underground cisterns, their function is entirely dependent on stable groundwater levels. As changing weather patterns lead to prolonged droughts in regions like Iran and North Africa, the aquifers that feed these ancient canals are being pumped dry by modern deep well technology or simply not being replenished by rainfall. When the water table drops below the level of the Kanat's mother well, the entire system, sometimes dozens of kilometers long, becomes a dry, useless relic. Conversely, in other parts of the world, increased flooding and more intense storm events pose a different threat. The sudden deluge of water can overwhelm ancient drainage systems, causing catastrophic erosion and collapse within tunnels that were engineered for a different climatic era. The delicate balance of moisture and temperature that has preserved organic materials and stable structures underground for millennia is being disrupted, threatening to erase these pages from the history book of human ingenuity. But amidst these challenges, there are also powerful stories of hope and successful preservation that show what is possible with dedication and international cooperation. A shining example is the magnificent Basilica Cistern in Istanbul. For centuries, this vast underground water palace was neglected, its beautiful Medusa-headed columns crumbling and its waters polluted. But a meticulous, years-long restoration project has brought it back to its former glory. Engineers used advanced techniques to carefully clean the centuries of grime from the marble without damaging it, repaired the crumbling brickwork of the vaulted ceilings, and installed a new water circulation and filtration system to prevent stagnation and algae growth. Most importantly, they built a new, non-intrusive walkway for visitors that protects the original structure while allowing people to experience its awe-inspiring atmosphere. This project proves that we can successfully conserve these sites for both study and public enjoyment, turning them from forgotten ruins into living museums that continue to tell their story. On a global scale, organizations like UNESCO play a crucial role in this safeguarding mission. When a site is inscribed on the World Heritage List, it isn't just given a prestigious title, it receives international recognition and a framework for protection. This can be a powerful tool for local conservationists, giving them leverage to argue against destructive development projects and helping to attract funding and expertise from around the world. The ancient water systems of places like Persepolis in Iran and the Kanats of the Iranian plateau have benefited from this status, putting them on the global map and rallying international support for their upkeep. UNESCO also helps to establish best practices for conservation, ensuring that well-meaning repairs don't accidentally cause more damage by using inappropriate modern materials that don't allow the ancient structures to breathe and move as they were designed to. This global effort forces us to ask some deeply reflective questions about our own role as temporary custodians of this heritage. What do we owe to the past, and what do we owe to the future? These underground networks are a testament to human collaboration across generations. A qanat, for instance, might have been started by a grandfather and finished by his grandson. Are we, the current generation, going to be the one that breaks this chain, that allows this accumulated knowledge and beauty to vanish on our watch? Preserving them isn't just about nostalgia. It's about safeguarding a library of sustainable technologies and urban planning solutions that we may desperately need as we face our own environmental challenges. The urgency of this task cannot be overstated. Every tunnel that collapses, every cistern that dries up, is a lost opportunity to learn from the past and a piece of our collective human story that is gone forever. The responsibility is immense, but so is the reward, ensuring that these whispers from the depths continue to inspire awe and wisdom for countless generations to come. The incredible news is that you don't need a time machine or a team of archaeologists to experience these hidden worlds for yourself. Many of these ancient subterranean networks are not only accessible but waiting to be explored, offering a tangible connection to the past that you can walk through, touch, and even, in some cases, boat across. If you find yourself in Turkey, the mind-boggling underground cities of Cappadocia, like Derinkuyu and Kamakli, are open to the public. You can literally walk the same narrow, cool passages that sheltered thousands from invaders, marveling at the rolling stone doors and intricate ventilation shafts that made life possible deep beneath the earth. It's an experience that shifts your entire perspective on ancient ingenuity. For a different kind of wonder, journey to Istanbul and descend into the breathtaking Basilica Cistern, a serene, column-filled underground palace where water still laps gently at the walkways and the mysterious Medusa column bases spark the imagination. It's one of the most atmospheric historical sites on the planet, but you don't even need a passport to begin your exploration. The digital age has thrown open the doors to these once secret places through incredible virtual tours. Projects like the Underground Rome initiative have used advanced laser scanning to create immersive, three-dimensional models that let you navigate the Cryptoporticus beneath the Roman Forum, or follow the path of an ancient aqueduct conduit from the comfort of your own home. These aren't just static photos, they are interactive journeys that make you feel like you're there, offering a perspective even a tourist on the ground couldn't get. Similarly, the Google Arts and Culture platform has partnered with institutions worldwide to offer virtual walks through sites like the Naples Underground, where you can explore the Greek and Roman subterranean spaces hidden beneath the modern city's bustling streets. It's archaeology meets the digital frontier, and it's an absolutely fantastic way to travel the world from your couch. For those who want to dive deeper into the history and engineering, there's a wealth of brilliant resources waiting for you. If you're fascinated by the Persian Kanat systems, seek out the book Kanat, A History of the World's Most Sustainable Irrigation Method by Dr. Mostafa Sharafi, which is a comprehensive and engaging deep dive into their development and impact. For a broader look at how underground spaces have shaped human history, Underlands, A Journey Through Britain's Lost Landscape by Ted Neild is a beautifully written exploration. And when it comes to documentaries, the BBC's Cities of the Underworld series, though a bit dramatic, offers a globe-trotting visual feast that takes you into these hidden spaces, from the catacombs of Paris to the tunnels beneath Vienna. For a more scholarly but utterly gripping look, the documentary The Persian Kanat, produced by UNESCO, details the incredible science and social organization behind these wonders. This journey of discovery doesn't have to be a solitary one. Some of the best insights come from sharing the experience. I am genuinely curious to hear about your own adventures. Have you ever walked through an ancient tunnel or visited a historic cistern that left you in awe? Maybe you've explored the cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde, which share that same principle of sheltered living, or perhaps you have a local hidden history spot you love. Share your stories and recommendations in the comments below. Let's build a community resource right here, a shared list of amazing places to explore and learn from. Your personal connection might just inspire someone else's next great adventure, turning this video from a one-way lecture into a vibrant conversation among fellow history enthusiasts. So tell me, what hidden history lies beneath your feet? Yet for all the physical evidence these structures leave behind, the most intriguing mysteries are not about how they were built, but why. The silent, empty tunnels and chambers offer no written memos from their architects, leaving modern historians to engage in a captivating, and at times heated, detective game to decipher their original purpose. This isn't just academic squabbling. It's a fundamental debate about how we understand the motivations of ancient societies. Were these underground networks purely practical feats of engineering, or were they imbued with a deeper, spiritual significance that we struggle to comprehend? The answer is rarely simple, and often the most fascinating theories live in the gray areas between these extremes. Take, for instance, the world-famous Nazca lines in Peru. The vast geoglyphs of spiders, monkeys, and birds etched into the desert floor are mesmerizing, but just as intriguing is what lies beneath them. The region is crisscrossed by a sophisticated system of subterranean aqueducts known as puquios, which tap into underground aquifers to bring water to the arid surface. For decades, the dominant theory was purely utilitarian. The puquios were a brilliant irrigation solution, and the lines above were perhaps part of a separate ceremonial tradition. But a compelling newer theory, championed by some researchers, proposes a direct and profound link between the two. They suggest that the spiraling, funnel-shaped design of the puquios' construction shafts might have served as a physical map of the entire underground water system. According to this view, the animal figures etched on the surface above could represent specific deities or symbols associated with water and fertility. The entire landscape, both above and below, might have been a vast, integrated ritual complex designed to communicate with the gods who controlled the most precious resource in the desert, water itself. One archaeologist supporting this view argues, to separate the practical from the spiritual is a modern conceit. For the Nazca, diverting water was a religious act. The puquios were the mechanical heart of a living ritual, and the lines were its prayer. This fusion of function and faith creates a similar puzzle deep beneath the sands of Egypt. While the pyramids understandably grab all the attention, the sprawling subterranean complex known as the Osirian, located at the Temple of Seti I at Abydos, is a historical riddle carved out of massive stone. This haunting structure, sunk deep into the earth and often partially flooded, looks nothing like the bright, decorated tombs and temples typically associated with Egyptian architecture. Its stark, megalithic style is far more ancient and brutalist. The traditional interpretation is that it was a symbolic tomb for the god Osiris, representing the underworld and the primordial waters of creation. The constant seepage of water was not an engineering failure but a deliberate feature, recreating the mythical Nile from which all life sprang. However, a minority of researchers look at the same evidence and see something else entirely. They point to the structure's precise alignment and its potential connection to hidden aquifers, proposing it could have been a sophisticated water management system, perhaps for controlling the local water table or even for some form of early hydraulic engineering that we don't yet understand. An Egyptologist skeptical of the purely ritualistic view notes, the ancient Egyptians were master hydraulic engineers. To assume every structure that holds water is solely symbolic is to underestimate their practical genius. The Osirian may have been a spiritual monument and a functional piece of infrastructure. The two ideas are not mutually exclusive. These debates are not just confined to ancient American or Egyptian sites. Even in the well-documented Roman world, the purpose of certain underground spaces is hotly contested. The hypogeums, vast multi-level underground complexes found throughout the empire, are a prime example. Were they primarily functional storage facilities and shelter during sieges, as their design suggests? Or did their dark, secluded, and acoustically strange environments make them ideal for secretive religious ceremonies, like the initiation rites of the popular cult of Mithras? The lack of definitive inscriptions means both interpretations remain valid, forcing us to accept that a single space could have served a dozen different purposes across its lifetime, its primary function shifting from pantry to temple to bomb shelter depending on the century and the crisis at hand. This ongoing scholarly conversation is not a sign of failure, but a sign of a vibrant, living field. It demonstrates that history is not a set of facts written in stone, but an ongoing dialogue with the past. Each new technological tool, from ground-penetrating radar to soil chemical analysis, offers another piece of the puzzle, allowing us to ask better questions even when we can't yet provide the final answer. These debates invite us all to become active participants, to look at these silent stones and wonder about the lives, beliefs, and brilliant minds that created them. And so, even as we uncover their secrets, these ancient networks guard their deepest mysteries closely, reminding us that for every question answered, a dozen more emerge from the shadows. The map of our subterranean past is still largely blank, filled with tantalizing hints and whispers of structures yet to be found. One of the most thrilling prospects for archaeologists is the potential for entirely unknown networks lying beneath sites we thought we knew intimately. The sprawling ancient metropolis of Teotihuacan in Mexico, for instance, has been studied for over a century, yet recent scans have revealed a massive cavern and a system of tunnels deep beneath the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent. This discovery suggests that what we see on the surface might just be the tip of a vast, hidden iceberg, a ceremonial and practical underworld that could completely reshape our understanding of the city's layout and purpose. Similar suspicions surround the Giza Plateau in Egypt, where ground-penetrating radar and muon tomography have detected several large, unexplained voids deep within the bedrock around the Great Pyramids. Are these natural geological formations, or could they be evidence of chambers, corridors, or even entire repositories that have been sealed off for millennia? The mere possibility sends a shiver of excitement through the archaeological community, suggesting that history's most famous landmarks might still be hiding their most profound secrets right below our feet. The tools we have to pursue these mysteries are advancing at a breathtaking pace, transforming the field from one of slow, careful digging to one of high-tech, non-invasive exploration. Satellite imaging is now so precise that it can detect minute changes in soil moisture and vegetation health, revealing the outlines of buried structures like the ghost of a filled-in Kanat shaft or a collapsed tunnel that are completely invisible from the ground. Artificial intelligence is being trained to scour these satellite images, analyzing petabytes of data to spot patterns and anomalies that would take a human researcher a lifetime to find. This powerful combination is like giving historians a superpower, allowing them to survey entire landscapes from orbit and pinpoint exactly where to focus their efforts on the ground. Even more revolutionary is the development of LiDAR, or light detection and ranging, which uses laser pulses fired from an aircraft to digitally strip away dense forest canopy, revealing the terrain beneath in stunning detail. This technology has been a game-changer in places like the jungles of Central America, where it has exposed vast, interconnected Maya settlements with complex networks of causeways and what appear to be subterranean features, rewriting our estimates of their population size and engineering prowess overnight. But perhaps the most profound questions are not just about finding new tunnels, but about re-evaluating the very capabilities of the societies that built them. We have to ask ourselves if we have been underestimating the scale and sophistication of these projects all along. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a complex dating back over 11,000 years, forced a complete rethink of the capabilities of prehistoric hunter-gatherers. It stands to reason that our understanding of ancient underground engineering could be similarly upended. Could there be intercontinental connections we've missed? Evidence suggests that the technology of the qanats spread from Persia as far as Spain and even Latin America. But were these ideas transmitted through trade and cultural exchange, or did different cultures independently arrive at the same brilliant solution to a common problem? The answer could tell us profound truths about the interconnectedness of the ancient world. Furthermore, we are only beginning to understand the acoustic properties of these spaces. Were some tunnels and chambers designed not just for moving water or people, but for amplifying specific sounds or frequencies for ceremonial purposes? The potential for a new layer of understanding, one that blends archaeology with physics and sensory studies, is immense and almost entirely unexplored. This leads us to the most captivating speculative question of all. Could there be entire underground cities on the scale of Derinkuyu that remain completely undiscovered? Given how well these structures were hidden by their original builders and then obscured by centuries of sedimentation and urban development, it is not just possible but likely. Regions with soft volcanic rock like parts of Italy, the Canary Islands, and even the American Northwest are prime candidates for such a discovery. The stories might already be whispering to us in local legends and place names that hint at a hidden world below. The job of future researchers will be to listen to those stories and use their new technological tools to test them. The story of these underground networks is far from a closed book. It is a narrative that is still being written, with each passing year bringing a new discovery that adds a sentence, a paragraph, a whole new chapter. The greatest revelation may be the dawning realization that ancient civilizations were far more innovative, interconnected, and deeply attuned to their environment than we ever previously dreamed, and that the most compelling evidence for this lies waiting not in the stars but in the silent, patient dark beneath our feet. So as we resurface from the depths of history, what is the ultimate takeaway from these hidden worlds? It's a story of breathtaking human ingenuity, a testament to our species' unique ability to not just overcome challenges, but to reshape our very environment in the process. These ancient engineers looked at a desert and saw a hidden river. They faced a mountain and tunneled straight through it. They were besieged by enemies and simply moved their entire supply chain underground. They flourished without roads, not in spite of their geography, but by forging a profound and symbiotic partnership with it. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that the most advanced technology isn't always the most complex. Sometimes it's the most elegant, the simple, brilliant application of gravity, geology, and sheer creative will. The true wonder lies in the beautiful interplay of the practical and the profound. Yes, these networks were marvels of engineering that mastered water distribution, created natural refrigeration, and built invisible highways for trade. But they were also so much more. They were sacred spaces that connected communities to their gods and their ancestors. They were canvases for cultural expression, giving rise to myths and legends that protected them for centuries. They were instruments of economic power and social cohesion, enabling the rise of the world's first great capitals. This multi-layered purpose is their most enduring lesson. It shows us that the solutions to our greatest challenges are rarely just technical. They are holistic, weaving together the threads of survival, spirituality, and society into a resilient whole. A historian who has spent a lifetime studying these systems perhaps said it best. We often measure ancient civilizations by the monuments they built to the sky, their pyramids and their temples. But perhaps their true genius is measured by what they built in the opposite direction. Their greatest achievements were not in reaching for the heavens, but in listening to the earth. That timeless ingenuity is not locked in the past. It's a living legacy. The next time you walk through a modern city, try to imagine the hidden world beneath your feet. Not just the subways and sewer lines of today, but the layers upon layers of history buried deep below. That sense of wonder, that curiosity about what lies hidden, is the greatest gift these ancient builders have left us. The story doesn't end here. This is just one mystery unraveled. What incredible ancient secret should we explore together next? Should we delve into the lost cities of the Amazon, decode the riddles of the Antikythera mechanism, or journey to the stone circles of Nabta? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your idea might just be the topic of our next adventure. If you enjoyed this descent into history, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more journeys into the forgotten corners of our past. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Now, the best way to truly appreciate the sheer genius of these ancient engineers is to try your hand at a little bit of their craft. So, for our final segment, we're going to bring history to life with a fun, hands-on project you can do at home. We're going to build a model of a Kanat system. This is a fantastic activity for a curious mind of any age, and it requires nothing more than a few common household items. You'll need a large, deep baking tray or a cardboard box, some sand or soil, a handful of small pebbles or gravel, a length of plastic tubing or a common drinking straw, a small plastic cup, and of course, some water. First, let's create our landscape. Fill your tray or box with a thick layer of sand or soil. Now, pack it down firmly on one end, and then shape it so that it gradually slopes downward, creating a gentle hill. This is our mountain range, and just like the Persian engineers, we need to find our water source. Take your small plastic cup and bury it at the top of your hill, so the rim is level with the sand. Fill this cup with water. This is your mountain aquifer, the mother well where our journey begins. The real engineering challenge is building the tunnel. Take your plastic tubing or straw. This will be our Kanat channel. Now you need to bury it. Starting from the bottom of your hill, carefully dig a narrow, shallow trench uphill towards your buried cup. The key is maintaining that perfect, gentle slope. You want the end of the tube at the bottom of the hill to be lower than the end that will connect to your water source. This is the entire principle of gravity flow in action. Once your tube is laid in the trench, cover it completely with sand, just like the real Kanat is hidden underground. Pack the sand down gently but firmly over it, leaving both ends of the tube exposed. Now for the vertical shafts. Take your pebbles or gravel. These will represent the openings of the access shafts that line the Kanat. Place them in a line, following the path of your buried tube from the top of the hill all the way down to the bottom, spacing them out evenly. These aren't just for show. In a real Kanat, they provide vital airflow and allow for maintenance. Finally, the moment of truth. Slowly pour a little more water into your cup, your mountain aquifer. Watch carefully at the bottom of the hill. If your slope is correct, you should soon see water beginning to trickle out of the exposed end of your tube, emerging from the ground exactly like a real Kanat, bringing life-giving water from the mountain to the plain without a single pump or any energy at all. This simple model demonstrates the core principles that allowed an entire civilization to flourish in the desert: gravity, hydrology, and ingenious hidden design. It makes abstract concepts tangible. You're not just hearing about history, you're holding it in your hands, understanding the challenges and the brilliance required to overcome them. It's a perfect, memorable way to connect with the past, and who knows, it might just inspire the next generation of engineers to look for solutions not just in front of them, but beneath their feet.